Oh, hi!
Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is my favorite entry in the series, and maybe one of my favorite games on the Switch. It is my quintessential Mario Kart with perfect driving, beautiful graphics, amazing music, and overall everything you could want from Mario Kart, even cleaning up the Wii U's original weak points. That said, our time doubling the game's content with the Booster Course Pass has come to an end, and thus the dark bell of gaming YouTube tolls for me to make a video ranking every course in the game. After solidifying my own list, I went and watched a few other rankings, and I was a little surprised what was the same and what was drastically different, so I think this should be pretty interesting. First, to briefly describe my criteria. Unlike my Smash stage and music rankings, I kept my guidelines fairly basic and loose for these, as getting too granular would make this an impossible task for time's sake alone. I originally played through with only a few of the booster cups out earlier in 2023 to establish a baseline ranking, then factored in the new tracks as they came out, and finally replayed them all briefly before making the video, all on 150cc. During that original playthrough, my main categories of consideration were playability, intrigue, and visuals. Playability is the general form of the track, how it feels just driving along, the balance of turns and straightaways, that kind of thing. Intrigue is what else the track throws at you. Hazards, environmental factors, and taking into consideration the story you experience progressing through the track. Basically anything that makes it more memorable and interesting. Finally, visuals is straightforward enough. The icing on the cake in terms of lighting, background elements, and the overall vibe. Meanwhile, when I replayed all the tracks, I tried to look at the broader experience of playing the tracks. How good does it feel to play, what makes it memorable, and do I want to play on it again? You may notice that music is not included in these parameters. I didn't want music to affect my view of the tracks, but I did go through and generally organize my thoughts on the stronger tunes. I'll be sharing my favorites later in the video. So now that you know what was in my head while making this list, let's go into the rankings. I will say though, even with this game's weakest courses, I don't think any of them are genuinely bad or ones that I absolutely don't want to play on. Maybe it's just how good the game feels to play, and like a lot of the top half of this list are tracks I really feel equally positive about. So since I won't always have a ton to say about each track, I wanted to do something a little different with this ranking. I'll still show you the full tier list at the end, but I'm going to be presenting the tracks in sets of 4 so you could hypothetically pick a set and go play them as a cup yourself. Since I don't outright hate any, we'll be going straight from worst to best. We got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. Starting off with the worst tracks in Mario Kart 8, we have nearly half of the first wave of DLC. Yeah, most of these probably won't surprise anybody. As a start to the DLC, this was troubling. Why they thought they could kick things off with 3 of the most boring tracks in the game, I can't fathom. At the absolute bottom, we have Toad Circuit from the 3DS. Now, again, even in this case, do I hate racing on it? No. The game is made well and therefore fun to play. However, this is as bland and ugly as 8 Deluxe gets. It is absolutely nothing. Next is Paris Promenade, a track that some people seem to think is decent from Tour, or at least middling in this game. Well, not me. To me, it's just as boring and uneventful as Toad Circuit, only elevated by driving into oncoming racers. But even then, some alternate paths confuse me. It feels like driving around Woohoo Town, but as a race instead of battle. Rounding off the DLC of this set is Tokyo Blur. Once again, boring, boring, boring. It has some hazards, otherwise it is completely unnoteworthy and lacks any character. Finally, maybe a little controversial to put in the bottom 4, but I don't care, I've never liked Donut Plains 3. The moles are cute and the tight turn you can do through the water is nice. Otherwise, another incredibly boring track I never seek out. Moving on, we have another set made up of 3 DLCs and 1 base game track. There's nothing to say about Sunset Wilds that wouldn't replicate the last section. It's just dull, and that's even without me having a connection to the original version's aesthetic touches. Leaving D tier behind and entering C, we have Rome Avanti. I don't like it. I find it just as boring as Paris and more confusing, and I don't feel it gives an interesting look at Rome at all. It's really only elevated by its first lap, which is kinda cool. Next is Sky Garden, and again, even without the context of the original, I don't care for this one all that much. I don't despise it the way some others do, but at the same time, I'm not going to stick up for it. It's an incredibly inferior Cloud Top Cruise, but at least the simplified DLC graphics look okay here. And then there's Water Park. I was happy to see that many agreed on this course's lackluster nature, even if this is way lower than most would put it. We're still not really at the point of any of these courses having something that piques my interest, and instead are just ones I would never opt to play on. Now we're starting to kinda maybe have tracks with a couple cool things about them, but are still ones I'd never seek out. Super Bell Subway's actual subway part is kinda cool, and I like the amount of paths you can take, but for me, it's just a little too hectic. Plus the non-subway stuff is boring, and the end of the course kinda has an awkward turn. London Loop is another completely boring tour track that doesn't feel like it captures an air of excitement within the city. The chomps breaking loose is cute though. Dolphin Shoals is carried by the music, we all know that, but here's the kicker. It's not even in my top music tracks of the game. The sax is a cool moment, but it's much more jarring than people would like to admit, and there's way cooler sax solos in the game. Beyond that, the beginning and end are boring, and I don't like racing on the Mallray, but the pipe boost and shortcuts are okay. Last, Dry Desert. For one, this is a visual style of desert I really don't care for. I just find it overly yellow and bland. I kinda go back and forth on a lot of aspects here. Sometimes I like the opening curve, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I like the sand vortex, sometimes I don't. I always don't like the oasis, but I do like the falling pillars turning into jumps, and there's some nice room for comeback at the very end. I'd say Dry Desert is where we start to get to courses I don't really mind playing, but that I have issues with. And in keeping with that, we have Dragon Driftway. Is there anything I particularly dislike here? Not tremendously. I've just never been a fan of its constant winding and the repeated downward bumps. It's a cool aesthetic and has some good shortcuts though. Next is Bone Dry Dunes, and this is how you color and light the desert. So nice visually. Gameplay wise though, another one I've never been excited about. The beginning is pretty fine, but I've never liked the end. The turn into the high road can be annoyingly tight, and it takes so much oomph to get to the bridge across the jump, which barely helps anyway. Then we have Boo Lake, and it's good. Actually, the only thing that keeps it this low is how short and limited it is. If this was the template for a brand new fuller track, I'm sure it'd be higher. Visually, it's very nice and feels more alive than other DLC tracks. I like the general flow, and it has a really cool shortcut. And lastly, Shroom Ridge. It's just another one I kind of plainly like. Nothing special, not the best NPC Cars track, but pleasant enough. We kick this set off with one many people would probably have at the bottom of their lists, Baby Park. I don't really get the hate, to be honest. I like the aesthetic and mechanical background elements, and it just is what it is. A fun, chaotic hell pit. It's a cute little gimmicky course. And let's follow it up with another simple course, Sky High Sundae. Like Sky Garden, the simplified art style suits this much better than other DLC, and I really don't have much against it. It's above Baby Park because the floating elements on the upward path are cool. I will concede that the railings being boosted is weird though. It's also very Fall Guys coded, which doesn't help or hurt. It's just kind of a thing I noted. Next is Twisted Mansion, and it's okay. I don't really love the underwater section, but I like the top and bottom split and the guards at the end. It's decent. And the closest Mario Kart course to me geographically, New York Minute. Now, why we couldn't have Philadelphia Flight, who's to say? But this one's pretty okay. This nighttime tour lighting is decently pleasant, but done better elsewhere, and I like the varied paths you take well enough. My only real complaint is the ending where you drive through a loading bay for no reason. This cup contains a bunch of courses that actually fell quite a bit upon my replay, starting with Bangkok Rush. I had a really fond memory of this one, and I can't tell you why. My notes remarked on branching paths and verticality and the tents being fun, but on replay I felt those were not implemented smoothly at all. It's also another one that ends with a parking garage. Why do they keep doing this? You know, those famous New York loading docks and Bangkok parking garages. It's still better than others, but this used to be way higher. Neo Bowser City is a fictional city, and therefore we escape the parking garage plague. But it's one I'm torn on. Yes, partially this is a skill issue, but I just don't care for most of the intrigue of the track being tight turns. It looks nice though. Then back to another heavy dropper, DK Summit. 8 Deluxe did not do this track any favors. Yes, it's a fun conceit and it's still fun enough, but the half pipes just don't work anymore. So one of the main parts of the track isn't exciting now. And ending with another big fall, both in the rankings and the last lap of the race, Berlin Byways. The womps and traffic help a lot, but they barely benefit Berlin Byways from being a bit boring. We're now on the last track of C tier and entering B tier, with courses I'm even more inclined to play but don't prefer over others. Music Park is right on the cusp of C and B for me. Honestly, most of this set could probably be C+ or B-, but we're not getting that granular. There's a lot of aesthetic touches and sections of the course I really like, but at the end of the day, it kind of fades from my mind and I don't really like the final shortcut. Shy Guy Falls is good, the waterfall bits are cute, and I like this final shortcut. Moo Moo Meadows being placed here might come a bit from my bias. My friend group plays this a lot, and I already didn't care for it all that much, and now I'm just burnt out on it. It's a good track, which is why it's this high, but I feel the end is really weak. The sky is beautiful though. Finally, Mushroom Gorge. This is a classic map for me that I still like a lot, but it is a little stale in this context. I like the different color mushrooms in the cave, but it's just a little short and lacking interesting path splitting. With this cup, we have a couple that surprisingly jumped in the ranks. That doesn't go for a Piranha Plant slide though. I think the vibe of speeding through the pipes is cool, but I don't like the big plant part and really don't like the ending. There's certain times where you get boosted with a weird velocity and don't make it up. Lame. Next is a huge increase from Athens Dash. I don't know how I had this so lowly ranked before my replay. It's a really solid tour track. The laps kinda sneak by, and it's just a well-designed track that uses the feel of Greek ruins rather than soullessly taking generic bits of city, with each lap being strong on its own. Then there's Mario Circuit 3, which may be one that's a surprise as a B tier track, but as we'll see later, I have nothing against standard feeling tracks. Sometimes you have to let the game be the game, and while this isn't the best version of that, I still like it aesthetically and in play. There's a nice tight curve, and it's short, simple, and satisfying. And then there's Amsterdam Drift. For as high as this got, it's not particularly memorable to me, but it's extremely cozy with the flowers and fun riverway. This and Athens are definitely let down by Tour DLC textures though. Keeping things going with the tour tracks, we start with Los Angeles Laps. I find the oil field as baffling as the next person, but it's got some great sections, especially along the beach, and it's another one where the laps sneak by you. Following that is Vancouver Velocity. It's good. Not too much to say about it. Fun sections like the ice skating and some foresty bridge areas, and the nighttime tour vibe is back to knock daytime tour out of the park. Next is Daisy Circuit, and it's just a nice smooth ride. That's it. It's about as neutrally good as things get before we start getting into courses with specific things I like. Finally, there's Peach Gardens, another hugely nostalgic one for me. I've always loved the Chain Chomp area with the topiaries, and I think turning things around on the last lap is a good twist. Keeping the good times going and ending with heavily nostalgic tracks, we start with the cozy vibes of Merry Mountain. It's one of the tour tracks with a super nice vibe all its own, and I think the start is really great with its shortcut. Following that is Riverside Park, another extremely aesthetically pleasant course with some very unique hazards in the Patuis. A little short, but since it plays nicely, it's enjoyable rather than lacking. Now we get to the nostalgic ones, first with Chaco Mountain. While it doesn't give me quite the same feeling as the original, I like what they did with it to keep things interesting, and I think the glowy vibe of caves in several DLC tracks is lovely. One that does nail the feeling of the original though is Daisy Cruiser. It's exactly what I want out of it, still plays great, and I love every section of it. It's only down here because it is a bit simple and short compared to others, and weird with this game's smoother controls. In the high echelons of B tier, we have Cheeseland. I love cheese, I'm a little freaking rat. It's a cute and incredibly unique vibe and a pleasant ride with some fun turns and nice gliding. Next is a superior water themed course to Water Park in every way, Cheep Cheep Beach. Another very pleasant ride, though I do think the middle gets a little ambiguous with no right, wrong, or distinct different paths. Still, lots of fun sections and hazards, and the ending is cramped and chaotic in a very fun way. Keeping to our lovely vibes, but in an entirely different category, Snowland. It's got great tones for its ice and sky in kind of the inverse of Dry Dry, but good. I like the moving elements and, of course, the penguins. And last, another superior water course, Koopa Cape. Now, it may have suffered a little in its conversion, but it's still a cool setting with 3 solid sections and a half pipe that doesn't feel absolutely terrible, and one that doesn't feel great, but that's fine, don't worry about it. As we approach the middle point, we're firmly entering tracks that I would frequently choose to play. First off, the final track of B tier, Rock Mountain. Not only do you get some great moments on the ground with nice curves and the climactic boulder finale, but you also get a ton of airtime if you play things right in some really satisfying gliding sections, including gliding over into the next lap. Next, our first track of A tier and another double word title, Ice Ice Outpost. Overall, a very pleasant course to race on with the fun constant overlap of its twin tracks, and what separates it even more is its unusually tough shortcuts. On some days that they catch me lacking, I might call them too hard and drop the track to B, but they are really cool. Then we have the starter course, Mario Kart Stadium. I've always really enjoyed this course, and it's another one I'll always play and nails that let the game be the game thing. Nothing overly crazy, just really well designed with a few rewarding shortcuts, but the aesthetics really put it together. The stadium ambiance is great, and I love the view the introduction to Anti-Grav gives you. Finally, Piranha Plant Cove. For DLC, this is a really involved map with unique laps that flow together nicely, interesting visuals that never get too confusing, and challenging turns. Now passing the halfway point, we begin to really see full cohesion of track design and visuals, starting with Grumble Volcano. I love the open but segmented ending paths, and of course the highlight here is watching everything crumble and erupt throughout the race. It's so daunting and dynamic, and I love it. Moving on, Big Blue. If you're looking for the feeling of pure speed, you can't get much better than the F-Zero tracks. Though I have to say, in terms of F-Zero vibe, I don't really feel it hits it as hard on the head as much as Mute City does, beautiful as it is. Still, this is a great track with fun boosts and spots to cut by taking advantage of the speed. Mario Circuit, on the other hand, has a perfect cohesion of how I want this track to look. The track itself is really pleasant and fun, and getting the fire piranha plants and Wiggler and the castle in the back, while still feeling like an actual track, just seals its placement for me. I'll always love courses that have that live audience stadium vibe, just like I do in Smash stages. And then with Moonview Highway, it's simply really solid. Everything from the curves to the item boxes to the traffic feels skillful to successfully race through, and its beautiful nighttime vibe only helps. Oh man, things just keep getting better and better. Say what you will, oval track haters, but Excite Bike Arena is so fun. It's got jumps, it's got mud, it's hectic, but not too much. Great track. Next we have another that hits that deepest nerve of nostalgia, Coconut Mall. This is a classic for tons of people, and while the ending may not be quite the same, I don't feel it hurts how fun this course is at all. Like Daisy Cruiser, with this I do feel you can tell that some tracks were made for the boxy, bouncy feel of prior Mario Karts though. Next is DK Jungle. Purely solid, some fun twists and shortcuts and hazards, great colorful jungle vibe, and this frog can be a real prick sometimes.
He's not loyal to a flag or a country or any set of ideals. He trades blood for money. And
last, just like any good ending, Rainbow Road, this time from SNES. Sure, it may be the lowest ranking of the Rainbow Roads, but despite it being fairly straightforward, it looks great, the thwomps are good obstacles, and with its open sides, it's a good test of skill against other racers. We're starting off this Wario and Waluigi themed pack with the total opposite of their energy, Squeaky Clean Sprint. This one surprised a lot of people, myself included, in just how good it was. This is a bona fide Mario Kart track with a fantastic progression through its theming, good environmental hazards, and its sneaky little high path. I will say though, broadly speaking, I don't like how some water geysers hurt you while some help you, or some cardboard cutouts are shortcut signifiers while some hurt you. Just a side note. Anyway, on to the Waz. Wario's Gold Mine. Honestly, not too much to say, just good job. I like the ending shortcut and jump. Waluigi Stadium follows with another huge hit of nostalgia, and you really don't feel like you should be playing it on another Mario Kart. The aesthetic is still completely there, and they've added some really interesting new paths. And finally, Waluigi Pinball. Another hugely nostalgic track, and I'm sure many of you will balk at this placement. My only complaint is that the track is kind of just two things. A lot of curve, and then the pinballs. It's still great and extremely unique and updated wonderfully, but that held it back just enough. Let's keep boosting through. Sherbert Land has fantastic differing paths, both horizontally and vertically, and its vibe is immaculate. Always like this one. Sydney Sprint is another tour course that took me by surprise. It just flows so well, probably being the best standard feeling city. And the second lap is nice and indulgent. Rainbow Road Wii is a tough but fair classic, looking as good as ever and was a great choice of ender for the DLC. I still have my issues with the half pipes in this game though. And Toad Harbor with some really great consistent layering and splits and room to spread out while still feeling fast paced and intense. For the last full group of A tracks, we hit up another Rainbow Road, this one being N64. It's a tiny bit basic and short, but better than having to be 3 laps, and it's still very tense and satisfying and has an incredible stylization. Sweet Sweet Canyon is a good track, I will not be lied to. It's got a nice big turn and the cool anti-grav stuff, and I like the ending Little Donut shortcut, and it's pretty and good. Bowser Castle 3 is an entirely different vibe, but is so good. I love the striking orange, and it just feels high. And the course itself is really good and tense. However, the main thing I want to talk about is the fact that the first time my friends and I raced on it, we all drove right off the edge thinking we'd glide to the castle. Could maybe call that a fault, but I won't because it's funny. And another complete vibe shift with Sunshine Airport. This is one of those tracks where, yes, it's good and has tons of great sections, but the story and progression that's told while racing really elevates it. If I could change anything though, I think it'd be cool if the last lap extended the road to the gliding and ended on you gliding out of the airport. Just before we get to S tier, we close out A with Toad's Turnpike. It's a classic concept and I still really like it and like the addition of the sideways wall tracks. Racing on the top of some trucks is cool, but I rarely find it pays off. Following that, we start S tier with Wild Woods. I never knew the Jersey Shore could look this nice. This is actually a track I frequently forgot about over the years, but every time I played it, I liked it more. There's not a single weak part to it. The short little path splits are nice break points, and its delightful natural vibe is the Shy Guy on top. We then close off this grouping with some big nostalgia tracks, the bigger being Calamari Desert. This was always one I loved as a kid, and I love how they keep true to the original while adding really exciting and interesting elements by having you race along the track. And last, Orange in an entirely different way, Maple Tree Way. Its beautiful fall vibe hides a dangerous ride with tight turns and an open wiggler section, and I like how open and varied it feels having you weave through the tree. Rosalina's Ice World manages to have its own distinct icy vibe and fits in a bunch of great separated paths and tough turns with somewhat obscured views. Madrid Drive is the second highest tour track here, and I really cannot understand how people call this one of the middling ones. It's so good. Its track layout is surprisingly varied and lively, and for once it actually feels like an encapsulation of different elements of its location. I absolutely love the different locales you race through. Up next is Animal Crossing. Besides the changing seasons altering things occasionally, this isn't the most complex course, but with things like the boosting apples and floating items, it's an extremely satisfying race. And Thwomp Ruins, which I do occasionally confuse for DK Jungle because of their vibe and big final shortcuts, which are both great. However, this excels with its splitting paths in the middle, open areas to take advantage of boost and let the pack spread out, and dynamic use of its hazards to change pathways. We start this set off with maybe the most nostalgic track for me in the entire game. DK Mountain is and has always been phenomenal. Every inch of this track is exhilarating with danger all around, and it converted to 8 Deluxe perfectly. Every good thing I could say about this track is already seared into every player's minds. Next is Yoshi's Island, a brand new track that surprised everyone both in its reveal and its quality. It's so damn vivid and lively and delightful, with a great design and so many fun elements, especially the secret shortcut at the end. And now the highest ranking tour city track, Singapore Speedway, another one that completely took me by surprise. This track is an absolute blast and puts most of the others to shame, feeling like a true blend of Mario Kart and the city concept. It uses its realistic elements perfectly while the whole thing feels bright and dreamy and still being great to race on. Lastly, Wario Stadium. Truth be told, I don't know why this is as high as it is. Maybe I've just played it so many times it's ingrained in me, but I do like this one a lot. Always loved the stadium vibe, and I like how it feels like little challenge sections with their own discrete hazards and requirements for racing. Before we get into the top 4 cups, it's time to reveal my top 20 best songs in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Oh, hold on, let me fix that for this comment in my Smash song ranking. My top 20 personal choices for the songs that I, Room 100, get the most individual enjoyment from in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe based on my own preferences and biases. Before we start, a quick shout out to the title theme, which isn't a track theme so it doesn't count, but it's absolutely incredible. Look, it's not my fault F-Zero has perfect music to race to. No one can fight me on this. Listen to these songs. Mute City is perfect. And Big Blue, I mean, this is unholy criminal behavior. You can't put this in a video game. This has some of the best solos I've ever heard from any song ever, especially from the sax player. This sax solo has single-handedly defined what I want out of a sax player. Just the screech. Absolutely perfect. Entering the top 16 tracks, we have Yoshi Valley. Yes, it's kinda sad we now know what place we're in, and yeah, there's really only one right path, but that doesn't stop me from loving this stage at all. I love the path there is, the ending is nice, and gotta give some extra points for Giant Egg. Next up, Mario Kart 8's Rainbow Road. This might be another one surprisingly high to others, but I don't get the hate for it. It's a solid rainbow road with nice turns and cool ending shortcuts, and I think the space station vibe is unique and cool. It fits what they were going for originally with the new tracks, I think. Next, this game's Mario Circuit, and I once again return to my I know it's basic but that's why I like it excuse. I kinda go into autopilot here, but in a good way with this track's nice flow, and I like the ending taking a second to reorient you. So far we might have been a little divisive, but I don't think anyone will disagree with Tick-Tock Clock being here. This is a fantastic course with great sharp turns and a perfect union between its environmental elements and aesthetics. For our last full S-tier list, we start with the first major surprise of the DLC tracks, Ninja Hideaway. People are really calling for this and Squeaky Clean to be mainstays, and I fully agree. There's so much going on here that it's baffling this came out alongside some of the worst tracks in the game. The multiple paths, the vertical layering, the hazards, the awesome rooftop ending, it's amazing. Following that, Cloudtop Cruise. The progression of this track aesthetically is amazing, going for a nice and curvy cloudtop drive, to the sharp airship turn, to the treacherous lightning-filled corridor, then back to the sky vibe and leaf shortcut spawning from the giant question mark block. It just feels right for a Mario Kart track. Next up, another Mario Kart must, Bowser's Castle. This is another one I don't really get the descent for. I think it's great. The split paths feel like they help the flow of racers while still being dangerous on their own, and the ending risk-reward for the extra boost is cool. Finally, Electrodome. This is another total integration of theme and playability, with great diverging paths that alter the soundtrack and a nice bouncy quality throughout the whole race. We're now getting into my top 8, and I already feel that some of these are going to bring some real disagreement. Again, my personal opinion, yada yada yada. Sometimes I can explain why I like things this much, sometimes I just do. This collection starts with Hyrule Circuit. I love this one, and I think the entire race has a great flow, with highlight moments being the Master Sword puzzle and ending curves. Then we enter S+ tier with Ribbon Road. I love the shrunken down aesthetic, and it has such a playful, good energy. The course itself is challenging, but fairly open at points, giving you room to pass if you time it right, and the titular ribbons are cool and have a couple great shortcuts. Next, Mute City. I really do like this one this much more than Big Blue. It just feels more F-Zero to me, both aesthetically and in the fact that you're meant to boost non-stop and you feel the speed. It's a high-octane, intense race every time, especially getting to the boostless end where you can make a last-minute jump with items. And closing this cup out, Royal Raceway. Again, I fully acknowledge this is a very standard-feeling Mario Kart track, and it's like putting Battlefield as high as I did in my Smash Stage ranking, but I don't care. I love this track, I always have, and I will play on it whenever I have the chance. It gives the items lots of room to feel important, I love the huge curve, and it just complements the game so well. Alright, we're finally here. My top 4 tracks for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. If you've been keeping track, you'll have some idea of what's here, but I think others might be a little contentious. We start this off with probably the most contentious pick for my top 4, Mario Circuit GBA. Much like Royal Raceway, is it all that special? No. Is it short? Yes. But I love playing on it every time because it lets the game be the game. It lets items be important while driving and turns remain paramount. It's got simple hazards, but they can change the game, and I like the little pit stop. And on top of that, I love when the tracks are just fully race tracks, and this smaller track vibe fits right in with go-karts. Argue with the Womp Wall. Following that, my third favorite track is Yoshi's Circuit. This is an all-time great course to me, and is definitely impacted by nostalgia, but I think its consistently tight turns with room for straightaway shortcuts fits Mario Kart perfectly. Plus, the whole thing is shaped like Yoshi. Come on now. It's amazing. I truly love every second of this track. Then our runner-up, Rainbow Road 3DS. I'm not even coming into this with nostalgia. I played Mario Kart 7 like once a decade ago. I didn't have any expectations of already loving it, but I do. I love it so much, and it's far and away my favorite Rainbow Road. Combining the dreamy rainbow quality with actual spacey elements opens up the course design so much. There's so much happening here that I would be happy to play 5 laps on it. The rings, driving on the moon, the changing use of gravity and perspective, just mwah, perfect. And finally, my single favorite track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, surprising no one, Mount Wario. Come on! You can't just make tracks like this to go in the middle of the base game. This is like an all-time great that needs to be at the end. It has full marks on absolutely everything I looked for. Visually, it's stunning, it's icy and brisk, but not cozy like the others, instead being intense and like something we've been training for. There's tons of splitting paths, cool gliding, jumps, and spots where you really work to keep your speed. I always want to play it at least once every time I play Mario Kart. And of course, the narrative. Starting on a plane with the other racers and jumping down to the top of the mountain, going down solid ice until it starts to melt away as you reach the mechanical heart of the track, using the water and cleared forests for resources, then reaching the more extreme sports-like jumps and flags until getting to the final desperate race to the bottom full of cheering onlookers. A fully and truly perfect Mario Kart course. To me, nothing tops Mount Wario. And that concludes my ranking of all 96 tracks in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Let me know what you think, what tracks you love and hate, and what you would change about my ranking. Again, I don't actively hate any of them. If your favorite is Toad Circuit, then sure, man, go ahead. Likewise, my top 20 may entirely change in time, because there are a handful of finely tuned and incredibly fun tracks. As for future content, my Pikmin 4 review is still in the works, and I plan to do more videos and streams this year than last, as I enter a year without making a full-length album for the first time since 2021. Until then, be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, thanks for watching.